Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. How are you doing? It's 20 days into the new year. Doing well. How are your intentions, your resolutions going? A couple of friends were talking about how it was going for them, and one friend said to the other one, he said, "You know, after all that CrossFit this morning, I am just so tired." And his friend looked at him and said, "It's pronounced croissant." "And how did you eat 9 of them?" Isn't that funny? Okay, yeah. Today, we're in part 3 of our 4-part series on our purpose and values that we've titled the series, Why Are We Here? What's the purpose for this community existing, and how do we live together in spiritual community? So the first week we talked about our purpose statement. As a matter of fact, just to review, why don't we bring those up and let's read this together. This is our purpose. In community, we nurture and empower each other, transforming our lives that we may serve the world. And then there are 3 values that we really landed on. We distilled down thousands of words to come down to these 3 areas we believe speak to who we are and how we live our purpose. And they are being, becoming, and belonging. Last week we talked about being. Let's read that one. Being. We live from our oneness with God and each other, experiencing abundance and connection with all life. And today we're talking about becoming. Let's read this together. Through spiritual practice and through grace, we heal and grow, revealing the Christ within. So that's what we're about today. Hildegard of Bingen was a medieval mystic in the Catholic Church in Germany. She led a convent there and an order and they studied, and she was a composer. She saw visions, just an incredible person and a leader in a time that women were really not allowed much power in that system, and yet she was such a powerful soul and presence that she was able to do this. And in her writings, which are a lot, she used this word, this Latin word, viriditas, a lot. Viriditas. What it really means is greening, the greening power. She used it to describe the way that spiritual life thrives in us as a green and growing force. Isn't that beautiful? And she compared it to like a desert experience, which is lifeless, and then this viriditas experience of spirit, of God revealing in us a thriving, expanding energy. And there's a statement that she made that I just love. She said this: "We are to stand at the green growing edge of our becoming." We are to stand at the green growing edge of our becoming. Last week we talked about being. It's really our theology. It's our understanding of oneness with God and each other, that the perfection of God's own nature is who and what we are. We are eternal, deathless, birthless, changeless beings who are now having this incarnate experience of humanity, of being a human being. But you don't have to do anything to be one with God. It's just who you are. That's our name. Unity means that. And so being is our nature. And yet, becoming is required too. Because unless we are fully demonstrating the infinite power and presence of God in absolutely every area of our life, we got some becoming to do, right? A friend of mine likes to say, mind your own becoming. That we are here to reveal our being through our lives, and that is a process of becoming. It's a paradox that there is being to who we are, and the becoming is how we reveal it. Sanford's theory of growth says that 2 things are required for someone to grow? Do you know what they are? Our educators might know. I know Cindy Wigglesworth is the first one to tell me about this. You need these two things. You need support and challenge. That's what you need to grow. Starting with early childhood development, but it works right all the way up into adult development, leadership development, spiritual growth. We need those two things in order to grow. We need to feel supported, and we need to be challenged. We did not think about that model when we were creating this statement, but boy, look how clearly it's there. Through spiritual practice, challenge, and through grace, support, we heal and grow. This is who we are as a community, that we offer this support so that we can all, my friend Kathy Hearn says spiritual community is where we grow up all over each other. Nobody has to be perfect. Nobody is perfect in the human sense. We get to make mistakes, and we do it in this context of love and forgiveness and gratitude. And we also want to be challenged to live more of who we truly are. So through spiritual practice and through grace, we heal and grow. If you think about this idea of support and challenge, being and becoming, really, that's just it. That's the ultimate in support is the being of God, is your nature. It's who you are. There's nothing that you can ever do to harm your spiritual eternal nature. How much more supported can you get than that? To have that awareness that you are one with infinite spirit, with infinite truth and love. And the ultimate challenge is this: you're never going to fully get there while you're in form. You're always going to have some work to do, some healing to step into. That's the ultimate in challenge, is that we're never going to be done with this work. Michael Beckwith says that all of our work in spiritual growth is subtractive, meaning that you can't add anything to one with God. You cannot up that. You get what I'm saying? Like, that's as good as it's going to get ever. The infinite power and presence are within you. That you can't do better than that. You can't add anything to that. But there is work to take things away. Your false beliefs, your smallness, your lies that you were told and you now tell yourself. These are the things, and what helps us become practice and grace. You've heard of the way that life works with us on the challenge aspect. You'll first get a little whisper in your ear. You might consider blah, 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 blah. Second time he comes around, it's a little tap on the shoulder. Have you noticed? Da, 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 da. The third time he comes around, it's a cosmic 2x4 right upside the head. How many of you have experienced the cosmic 2x4 in your lives? Oh, yeah, most of us have. Those who didn't raise their hand, you're lying. We know. It's okay. We love and support you just where you are. That is the experience of we are challenged and supported by the very nature of reality. And that's how we seek to live these principles in our lives in this church. That we create a container, we create a community where we can do this work. Let's talk about practice. Through spiritual practice, what does spiritual practice mean? One of my great favorite stories about this is the great violinist Itzhak Perlman was once told after a concert, they said, "Maestro, I would give my life to play the way you do." And he looked at the person and said, "I did." He committed his life to the practice of his gift. There was a talent that he had, and then he chose actions on a daily basis that developed it, lined up with it, so that he could actually live who he knew himself to be. It's the same way with our spiritual practice. The main practices in Unity are prayer and meditation. And they're meant to be practiced every day. That if we can align ourselves with that truth, we will live more clearly and more cleanly the more time we spend in communion with God. Some other practices, we talk about affirmations and denial. We affirm the spiritual truth around any situation in our life. We deny the human condition. We deny the less than optimal results that we're getting. Tithing is a spiritual practice where we actually put our money where our spirit is. we actually, that's a practice of saying, yes, I believe God is my source, and I will give generously from a spiritual awareness and consciousness. Service, as I mentioned with celebrating Dr. King's federal holiday, it's a spiritual practice to give of your time and energy to serve another. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm really inspired to do these practices, and sometimes I am not. And the challenge is that we show up anyway. I may not feel like being an usher today, but I signed up for it. That's a discipline, and we do it. I may not feel like sitting down and meditating, but I'm going to do it anyway. I may not feel like I'm one with God today, but I'm going to align myself. I'm going to give myself an opportunity to reach my consciousness back to truth. We may not feel like doing it, and that is where, if we can challenge ourselves to show up, to make our actions and our words line up with the truth that we know to be true about us. That's all that practice is. There are ways that we have of remembering who we are and acting like it. Over time, we will feel it more. In one of Malcolm Gladwell's books, I think it was The Tipping Point, he talked about the rule of 10,000 hours. That those people in any field who have achieved mastery that sets them apart from everyone else, he said the rule of 10,000 hours applies. They must have put in a minimum of 10,000 hours into whatever it is for them to demonstrate that mastery. One of the examples he uses is the Beatles. In the early 1960s, late 50s, there were a lot of guitar bands coming out of England. A lot of them. The Beatles had gone to Berlin for some months or even more than a year, I believe, a year and a half, this kind of comes to mind. And they had these incredible gigs. They would gig for 9 hours, 7 days a week. I was a professional musician for 30 years. I have never done that. But they did. And so when they came back to England, they were prepared. They were masterful in what they were bringing, and it set them apart. And it's there in the music. I mean, the Beatles, they're kicking. I mean, it is good. They had that mastery. And the same applies to our spiritual practice. If we will discipline ourselves gently, give ourselves the opportunity to practice this truth, meditation, prayer, affirmation, denial, tithing, service, those are just some. There are more practices. We will begin to experience the mastery of this life. Emily Cady says it this way in Lessons in Truth. Every man and woman must take time daily for quiet and meditation. In daily meditation lies the secret of power. No one can grow in either spiritual knowledge or power without it. Practice the presence of God just as you would practice music. No one would ever dream of becoming a master in music except by spending some time daily alone with music. Daily meditation alone with God focuses the divine presence within us and brings it to our consciousness. Romans 12:2 says, "Be ye renewed." Now, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is. Spending time renewing our mind with these practices, it sets us up to approach life from a place of spiritual truth rather than separation. It's powerful. And if you're willing, and I talked about last week, sometimes you can't be willing, but you can pray to be willing to be willing. I've even been where I just need to be willing to be willing to be willing. I've been there. But it'll move me back into that place. And here's the thing I want to tell you, because we're about to talk about grace. It gets a lot easier in this next part of the talk. You don't have to be perfect with your practice. You probably won't be. Amen? Anyone who's longtime meditators, you know. There are days it's harder. Things intrude. But the more disciplined you can be with your practice, the more time we spend in truth, the more likely we are to release our false beliefs, and that's what it's all about. And grace is the way as well. We might think about these also being, support and challenge. We might also think about them as being the feminine divine and the masculine divine. The masculine divine is all about our choice, intention, and action. And the feminine divine is all about allowing and consciousness and awareness. It's this open space. Do your best and let God do the rest. That sounds good. Let's just say that. Do your best and let God do the rest. And this is the grace of God. A great samurai, this is one of my favorite teaching stories from the Zen tradition. A great samurai decided that he needed to get some spiritual teaching or learning. He didn't know much about spirituality, and so he asked who was the best, and he was told this old monk who lived in a monastery up in a mountain, and he found his way there, and the old man was sitting there meditating, and the samurai stood by and patiently and in a foul mood and waiting for him to finish, and finally the old man noticed him, opened his eyes, and the samurai said, "I want you to teach me about heaven and hell." And the monk looked at him and said, You brutish thug who have made your life by violence and ignorance and opposition, do you think you could learn anything of heaven and hell or spiritual reality in any way? And the samurai was enraged that he was so insulted, and he pulled out his sword and he's prepared to strike down the old monk. And the monk looks at him and said, "That is hell." And he realizes, the samurai, what had just happened. That he had been confronted by his own ignorance and ugliness. And it showed him something, that this is hell. This egoic way of being it's hell. And then he dropped to his knees in gratitude, and he wept, and he laid his sword down, realizing that this old man had just risked his life to teach him this lesson, to offer him this grace. And the monk looked at him and said, "And this is heaven." I've used this story a lot to talk about how heaven and hell are states of consciousness. I've never thought about how it applies to our becoming. But like all the great teaching stories, whether it's the parables of Jesus or the Zen koans, there are layers and layers of truth here. The samurai represents the conditioned mind. The mind that lives by what happens in this world and mundane reality. And it is ugly and it is violent. And the monk, the confrontation of showing him what was so not true, allowed the samurai to release his conditioning in an instant and become open to being something else. This is how life will work with you around support and challenge. Whatever is happening in your life that feels so insulting and aggravating and against everything I'm looking for, it is like this opportunity for life to say, who would you be without this thought? Who else might you be? That's grace. That right where you are. It's like, I saw this recently, Hafiz. God has circled this place on a map for you to be today. You are right where you need to be. And now is your opportunity to lay down the sword, to quit fighting everything, and be willing to be brought back gently into the awareness that you are love personified. This is how we heal and grow. Through practice and through grace. Rumi says this, "Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." Matthew chapter 18. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And he called a little child to him, and he placed the child among them, and he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter into the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of the child is the greatest in the kingdom, and whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. This story is saying the same thing as the samurai story, is saying the same thing which comes from the Buddhist tradition, saying the same thing as Rumi, which is from the Sufi, the Islamic tradition. It's all saying the same thing. Who you truly are is not how you've been showing up. There is a deeper, truer identity. And to get back to that place of your most authentic self is the way forward. We get conditioned. It is the conditioned mind that thinks I'm supposed to know, I'm supposed to do. I've had so many people come to me for counseling, often men in their 50s and 60s who they went to the college, they got the grades they were supposed to get, to go to the college they were supposed to get the degree they were supposed to get, to do the career they were supposed to get, and then in middle life they're like, who am I? This was not my choice. I chose what was expected of me. You're invited. Life is inviting you. And to have a truer experience of your authentic being. Elizabeth Gilbert, she wrote Eat, Pray, Love. I heard an interview with her recently, and she said, and her new definition of magic is this: what wants to happen next. I love that. And I think that a lot of the people that look like they have magical lives, they're like showing up and everything is working and they're just moving. Sometimes unexpected things they're doing, but it's all just so beautiful. They're just listening better than I am. They've developed that sensitivity to what wants to happen. Not what they need you to do and not what you think you ought to do. I had an example came to mind in the first service. I have been so ruled in my life by what people think of me. I was the office help at my first church in my 20s in Dallas. Not my first church. I grew up in church, believe me. But as an adult, the first one I chose to go to, the church was kind of on hard times. It was small, and they needed some help, and I was cheap, and they hired me to answer the phones and pay the bills. I don't know what they were thinking. I was still drinking at this time. And I knew I was not doing a good job at this, but I was trying to maintain the image. And one of the board members called and asked me to give a message to our interim minister. And I said, it was Petra was the interim minister, Deb. And I said, okay, I'll be happy to do that, Ellen. Can you remind me how you spell your last name? Because I had forgotten her name. And I thought, this will be clever. I can trick her into remind me her last. I don't have to be exposed as this person who doesn't know everything they're supposed to know. And she got quiet and she said, yeah. S-M-I-T-H. Oh, that spelling of Smith. Busted. I was embarrassed. Yeah, Karen said, I would have just said, oh, it's not with a Y? No, I knew I just would need to stop digging the hole. And I think back, what was it in me that thought I was supposed to know everything? Why did I think I was supposed to have all the answers? And I've been much better served in my life by being like a kid. It's like, I forgot your name. Can you tell me? I don't know how to do this. Can you show me? I know I agreed I would do this. I can't. Just to be open and authentic. And when we begin to break down all of those conditioned thinking, ideas and practices and ways, and we can just let it all go and be who we are, it's so much lighter, filled with grace. And then, what if we choose our practices in life from who we truly are? What if we choose the way we spend our time from who we truly are? We can build something from that true identity. In a minute, I'm going to ask Ken Gale to come out here and show you what that looks like. Someone who, at an early age, knew that he was a gift as his authentic expression and the way he gave himself into that over time. You don't have to sing like Ken Gale to do this. He's just an example for us today. But what I want to remind you of is that you are called to a holy purpose, and it is to be who you are. And if you're willing to listen you will be guided into what's next. God bless you.
I love you.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.